Ellis Winston, a man in his late 70s, was a fixture every Friday afternoon outside Ramsey's barbershop. His weathered wooden chair, like him, leaned slightly but stood firm. Etched into his stoic face were the unspoken stories of a U.S. Army combat medic, Vietnam, 1971, a detail stitched onto his faded cap. In his hand, an old wooden cane, its head carved with "First Cavalry, Medical Detachment," was less a support than a silent testament. The townsfolk knew him, or knew of him, a quiet legend who'd once saved 6 men with nothing but gauze and grit. Now, he mostly watched the world go by, a silent sentinel on a street that had changed many times over, while he, and his chair, remained. Officer Brad Kinley, young, white, and brimming with an unearned confidence, disliked anything that didn't yield to his authority. Ellis's unchanging presence, his quiet dignity, irritated Kinley profoundly. Stepping out of his patrol car, cheap sunglasses masking his eyes, Kinley sauntered towards Ellis. "Didn't think these old relics still existed," he scoffed, his voice laced with disdain. Ellis didn't respond, his gaze fixed on a falling maple leaf. Kinley pressed on, "This chair yours? Or is this whole sidewalk a monument to you jungle crawlers?" A passerby slowed, phone ready. Kinley smirked. "Go ahead, film it. Show everyone these old-timers ain't heroes." Ellis finally looked up, his eyes deep, unreadable pools. Kinley, emboldened by the silence he mistook for weakness, felt a perverse urge to assert dominance over this man who seemed to exist beyond his control. "Think you're a monument?" Kinley sneered, pulling a small can of red spray paint from his utility belt. Before anyone could react, a sickening hiss cut the air. A crimson arc desecrated Ellis's cap, the paint streaking down his gray hair and onto his scalp. The acrid smell of chemicals filled the afternoon. Ellis remained still, a statue of profound restraint, only his grip tightened momentarily on his cane. The cane, however, slipped from his unerringly steady hand, clattering onto the pavement. The impact, a sharp crack like a breaking bone, split the carved wooden head. The 1st Cavalry, Medical Detachment, inscription now lay half obscured, a desecrated emblem. Kinley stepped back, a twisted artist admiring his handiwork. "There, properly decorated, old man," he crowed, unaware he had just vandalized more than a man, he'd assaulted a legacy. The snap of the cane, the hiss of the paint, had been punctuated by multiple clicks and the silent recording of several smartphones. "He just got out of the hospital, you psycho," a young woman from the barbershop screamed, pointing to a faint band still on Ellis's wrist. A small crowd gathered, their eyes reflecting not sympathy, but the morbid thrill of a public spectacle. Kinley, momentarily flustered, tried to intimidate them, but it was too late. Multiple videos of his artwork were already finding their way to the internet. One, uploaded by a teenager with the simple title, "Cop Paints Vet," literally showed the raw, unedited humiliation. Kinley felt a flicker of unease as he retreated to his car, the faces in the crowd no longer holding fear, but a chilling judgment. The digital tide was turning. Within hours, the footage exploded online. The most shared clip, a stark 23-second segment, captured the precise moment the red paint struck Ellis's cap. Dubbed the 23rd second, it needed no commentary. The image of the elderly black veteran, his combat medic, Vietnam 1971, cap violated, his quiet dignity under assault by a uniformed officer, ignited a firestorm of outrage. Veterans forums buzzed with fury. Hashtags like #HonorOurVets and #JusticeForEllis trended globally. News outlets picked up the story, the chilling visuals leading every broadcast. Ellis Winston, in his profound silence, became a symbol of forgotten sacrifices and a mirror reflecting a nation's uncomfortable truths about respect, race, and authority. The cop's sneer versus the veteran's stoicism was a battle fought on millions of screens. While online outrage surged, a different kind of response was taking shape. A tall, impeccably dressed black man in his late 40s, exuding an aura of quiet command, walked into the local police precinct. This was Malcolm Winston, Ellis's son. He wasn't loud, he wasn't aggressive, but his very presence seemed to shift the building's atmosphere. Officers looked up, conversations paused. He moved with an understated purpose that unnerved the desk sergeant. "I'm here regarding the incident involving Mr. Ellis Winston and Officer Kinley," Malcolm stated, his voice calm, his eyes holding an unreadable depth. He didn't make demands, he made it clear he was there for answers, and that he expected them. The precinct, used to bluster and noise, found itself disarmed by his composed intensity. He was an anomaly they couldn't categorize. Malcolm's progress through the precinct was unnervingly smooth. When a junior officer tried to halt him citing protocol, a quiet word into his phone to an unseen contact resulted in a hushed, urgent instruction to let him pass. He reached the office of Precinct Captain Miller. "Officer Kinley's actions are under review," Miller began, attempting a tone of control. Malcolm simply placed a slim, unmarked data stick on the polished desk. "That contains Officer Kinley's unedited body cam footage, which I'm sure your internal affairs is eager to see, alongside a preliminary compilation of his past civilian complaints, several of which were misfiled." Miller's composure faltered. This wasn't a grieving son, this was a strategist. Malcolm's eyes, steady and analytical, scanned the room. "My father served this country with honor, Captain. I expect this department to honor that service by addressing this lapse in judgment swiftly." The pressure, both public and now intensely personal for Malcolm, was immense. Captain Miller, after a tense, closed-door call where the name Winston was uttered with a new, cautious respect by a high-ranking city official, knew he had no choice. Officer Brad Kinley was summoned. In front of Malcolm, whose expression remained unreadable, Kinley was officially informed of his immediate suspension pending a full investigation. His badge and service weapon were confiscated. As Kinley, sputtering in disbelief, was escorted out, a detective whispered to his partner, "Who is this guy Winston?" A quick, discreet search by a tech-savvy officer on secured databases yielded nothing but access denials and flagged inquiries, hinting at a past littered with high-level clearances and a name intentionally scrubbed from easily accessible records. Malcolm Winston was a ghost from a very powerful machine, and he was just getting started. Later that evening, Malcolm sat with Ellis in the quiet of the old man's living room. The faint smell of turpentine lingered where Ellis had tried to clean his cap. Malcolm gently took the cap, dabbing at the stubborn red stain with a cloth. No words were exchanged for a long while, the silence thick with shared history and unspoken pain. "They don't see the uniform anymore, Dad," Malcolm finally said, his voice low. "They just see what they want to." Ellis nodded slowly, his eyes on his son's hands, strong, capable hands that had once, Ellis knew, navigated far more dangerous territories. "Dignity ain't in what they see, son," Ellis replied, his voice raspy. "It's in what you refuse to let them take." Malcolm met his father's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. The fight wasn't just about a can of paint, it was about reclaiming a narrative decades in the making. Days later, Malcolm Winston sat at a polished table in a secure government building. Present were carefully chosen representatives from Veterans Affairs, the Department of Justice, and even a discreet observer from Homeland Security. This wasn't a formal hearing, but an information-sharing session Malcolm had quietly orchestrated through contacts from his former life, a life as a retired Army colonel who specialized in strategic intelligence and systemic analysis. He presented a concise, devastatingly thorough dossier. It detailed not only Kinley's pattern of escalating misconduct, meticulously cross-referenced, but also highlighted systemic failures within the local police department's oversight and disciplinary processes. "This isn't about one rogue officer," Malcolm stated, his tone even. "It's about a culture that allowed him to flourish. My father is one man. How many others are there?" He wasn't asking for vengeance, he was demanding accountability that rippled upwards. As the interagency inquiry sent quiet shockwaves through bureaucratic channels, a second video surfaced, this one from a garage security camera across the street from the barbershop. It was time-stamped just moments before the paint incident. The grainy footage showed Officer Kinley confronting Ellis, then deliberately, almost casually, stomping on Ellis's wooden cane, snapping the carved head bearing the 1st Cavalry, Medical Detachment, insignia. The cold, calculated malice of the act was undeniable. Public fury, already at a high, reached a boiling point. Investigative journalists, spurred by the new evidence, dug deeper into Kinley's record. They uncovered a string of past incidents, excessive force complaints, racial profiling accusations, all quietly dismissed or buried with minimal reprimand. The image of the shattered cane became as potent a symbol as the paint-stained cap. The public outcry forced the city to convene a formal disciplinary hearing for Brad Kinley, which rapidly took on the air of a public trial. Kinley, arrogant and unrepentant, maintained he was maintaining public order and dealing with a non-compliant individual. His defense was a textbook recitation of procedural justifications. Then, a surprise witness was called, facilitated by Malcolm's discreet inquiries, Helen Kinley, Brad's aunt, a black woman in her late 60s. A retired Army nurse, she had served in Vietnam during the same period as Ellis. Her voice, clear and steady, filled the stunned courtroom. In the spring of 1971, at a field hospital near Pleiku, she began, her eyes fixed on her nephew, a young combat medic, Ellis Winston, carried a critically wounded white soldier nearly 2 miles under heavy fire. "That soldier was your father, Brad. Ellis saved his life." A collective gasp swept the room. Brad Kinley's face went ashen. The man he had humiliated was the hero who had given him a father. Helen Kinley's testimony was the killing blow. Ellis, present in the public gallery, made no sound, his quiet dignity a stark contrast to Brad's crumbling facade. The revelation that Ellis had saved the life of the father of the man who assaulted him created a maelstrom of media condemnation and public disgust. As if this weren't enough, an investigative journalist, following a lead from Malcolm's dossier, uncovered an even more damning truth. Brad Kinley had fraudulently used his father's veteran status to obtain a draft deferment during a period of active conscription, avoiding military service himself. The man who sneered at jungle crawlers and desecrated a veteran's symbols was a draft dodger hiding behind a stolen valor of sorts. Stripped of his job, his reputation, and any shred of public sympathy, Kinley faced not just departmental sanctions but potential federal charges for his draft fraud. His collapse was total and absolute. The saga of Ellis Winston and Brad Kinley became a national inflection point. It sparked widespread discussions about systemic racism within law enforcement, the often invisible sacrifices of black veterans, and the true meaning of honor. Ellis, though he never sought the spotlight, became an unwilling icon of quiet resilience and profound dignity. Across the country, spontaneous tributes appeared, murals depicting a stoic older man with a paint-stained cap, veterans groups holding vigils, schools incorporating his story into civics lessons. Malcolm, having set the wheels of justice in motion, retreated from public view, his point made not through fiery speeches but through precise, systemic action. The most significant changes were quieter. Police departments began overhauling use of force and de-escalation training, with Ellis's case as a mandatory module on respecting veteran status and human dignity. No single law was named after Ellis Winston, no statue erected in a park. Yet, his impact was undeniable, woven into the fabric of a slowly changing societal consciousness. The true monument to his ordeal was the uncomfortable self-reflection he forced upon a nation. It was in the slight hesitation of an officer before speaking, the renewed attention given to a veteran's ID, the quiet funding increases for VA mental health services. Ellis continued his Friday ritual at the barbershop, the red stain on his cap faded but still visible, a permanent reminder. His presence was a living lesson. What does true respect look like in your community? How can we ensure that the dignity of those who served, especially those marginalized, is always upheld? Share your thoughts with respect. Comment, like, and subscribe for more stories that matter.